Think about the last time you walked into a room full of people and felt something shift inside you. Not dramatically, just quietly. A small adjustment. Your posture changed. Your voice found a slightly different register. Your face arranged itself into something appropriate for the occasion. And somewhere beneath all of that, the version of you that had been sitting alone with your thoughts just a few minutes earlier. That version stepped back, and something else stepped forward. Most people never stop to notice that moment. But it happens constantly. And for some people, it happens so automatically, so completely, that they have almost forgotten there is a difference between the face they show the world and the one they carry inside. This is what social masks psychology is really about. Not deception in the dramatic sense, not manipulation or pretending to be someone you are not in some calculated way. It is something quieter, and in many ways more painful than that. It is the slow, steady performance of a self that feels safe enough to show, while the real one waits unseen for a moment that may never come. Carl Jung, in his explorations of the human psyche, described something he called the persona. The word itself comes from the Latin term for the masks worn by actors in ancient theatre. Jung understood that every person develops a social face, a way of presenting themselves to the world that allows them to function, to be accepted, to navigate the complicated terrain of other people's expectations. In his work, including the ideas developed in 2 essays on analytical psychology, he made clear that the persona is not inherently a problem. We all need one. The difficulty arises when a person becomes so identified with their mask that they lose contact with what lies beneath it. That is the wound this video is really about. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from wearing a mask for too long. It is not physical tiredness. It is something deeper. It is the fatigue of constantly monitoring how you're being perceived, of editing yourself before you speak, of laughing at things that are not funny to you, agreeing with things you do not believe, and shrinking yourself into whatever shape seems most likely to be approved of in this particular room, with these particular people, on this particular day. If you have ever felt that kind of tired, you already understand more about social mask psychology than most textbooks will ever teach you. So why do people do it? Why do we wear masks at all? One of the most honest answers is also the simplest. Because at some point it worked. Somewhere early in life, most people learned that certain versions of themselves were welcomed and certain versions were not. The child who was praised for being cheerful learned to perform cheerfulness even on hard days. The teenager who was mocked for being sensitive learned to hide sensitivity behind humor or indifference. The adult who was punished, emotionally or socially, for expressing a need learned to stop expressing needs and to call that strength. The mask, in its origin, is almost always a form of protection. And protection, when you genuinely need it, is not weakness. It is intelligence. The problem is that protection can become a prison if you never examine whether you still need it. Dale Carnegie spent much of his life studying how people relate to one another, and one of the things he understood deeply was that most human behavior in social situations is driven not by confidence, but by the fear of rejection. People want to be liked. They want to belong. They want to matter to the people around them. And when that desire becomes desperate, when belonging feels like survival, people will reshape themselves endlessly to secure it. This is where people-pleasing lives. Not in generosity, which is a genuine and beautiful thing, but in the anxious performance of generosity. The smile that is really a question, do you still approve of me? The agreement that is really a surrender, I will give up my own position if it means you will not pull away. The helpfulness that is really a negotiation. If I make myself useful enough, maybe I will be safe here. The tragedy of this pattern is not that it fails immediately. Often it works. People do like the person who always agrees, always smiles, always makes things easy. The problem is that the person doing all of that, agreeing and smiling and making things easy, is slowly disappearing. And one day they look up and realize they have no idea who they actually are when no one is watching. Nietzsche, in his own sharp and uncompromising way, was deeply suspicious of the social self. He saw the pressure to conform, to perform, to smooth yourself into something palatable for the crowd, as one of the great dangers to genuine human development. He believed that most people never truly become themselves because they are too busy becoming what others expect. Whether or not you agree with everything Nietzsche wrote, that particular observation cuts close to something real. Because here is what social mask psychology reveals when you look at it honestly. The mask does not just hide you from other people. Over time, it can hide you from yourself. There is a pattern that many people recognize when they finally slow down enough to examine it. They notice that they feel most like themselves in very specific, often private moments. Alone in the car, walking somewhere without a destination. In the middle of a conversation with one person they completely trust. And they notice that in most other situations, there is a kind of performance happening. Not always conscious, not always dramatic, but present. A version of themselves that is calibrated for the room rather than rooted in something real. The practical question is not how to rip the mask off. That is rarely wise and often harmful. The question is more subtle than that. It is, where do you perform? Where do you disappear? And where do you feel real? Those three questions, taken seriously, can tell you more about your inner life than years of vague self-reflection. Because the places where you perform reveal what you are afraid of. The places where you disappear reveal where you have given up on being seen. And the places where you feel real, those are the places worth protecting, worth expanding, worth building a life around. The mask protected you once. That is worth acknowledging without shame. Whatever version of yourself you learned to present to the world, you built it for a reason. It helped you survive something, a family dynamic, a social environment, a relationship, a period of your life when being fully yourself felt genuinely dangerous. You do not have to be angry at the mask. You do not have to be ashamed of it. But you are allowed to ask whether you still need it in the same way. You are allowed to notice that some of the rooms you are performing in now are not the rooms you were originally afraid of. That some of the people you are managing your image for are not actually threatening you. That the protection you built for one chapter of your life may be costing you something important in this one. Emotional intelligence, at its deepest level, is not about reading other people. It is about reading yourself honestly enough to know when you are being real and when you are performing, and having enough self-respect to close the gap, slowly, carefully, in the ways that are safe enough to try. You do not have to become someone who has no social awareness, no tact, no ability to adapt to different situations. That is not authenticity. That is just a different kind of performance. The performance of radical honesty, which often has more to do with ego than with truth. What you are looking for is something quieter. A self that can move through the world without constantly abandoning itself. A way of being with people that does not require you to disappear in order to belong. That is not a destination you arrive at once. It is a practice. A daily, imperfect, genuinely worthwhile practice of noticing when you have stepped away from yourself and finding your way back. If this video gave you something to think about, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper patterns of human behavior and the psychology of who we really are, Inside the Labyrinth is here for exactly that. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.